The first time she threatened me, her weapon was already charged. Blue plasma crackled along the edge of the blade, casting sharp reflections across the steel walls of the transport bay. The alarms had stopped screaming minutes ago, replaced by an uneasy silence that pressed against my ears. Smoke drifted in thin ribbons from a ruptured conduit overhead. I stood still, hands raised, knowing better than to make sudden movements. "Take one more step," she said, voice low and steady, "and I'll end this." Her eyes weren't human. They glowed faintly, silver with streaks of violet, marking her as one of the Aurelian Dominion's elite enforcers. I had seen holovids of them growing up on the outer colonies, tall, armored, merciless. The kind of beings sent to erase rebellions before they even formed. And here I was, alone with one of them, trapped inside a disabled interstellar transport drifting between systems. "I'm not armed," I said carefully. "You can skim me if you want." She already had. I could tell by the way her gaze flickered, processing data faster than any human implant. Still, the blade didn't lower. "You sabotaged the engine," she accused. "You caused the jump failure." "I didn't," I replied. "If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have waited until we were both stuck out here." For a moment, nothing moved. The ship groaned softly, metal expanding and contracting as it struggled to regulate internal pressure. Finally, she tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. "Your vitals indicate elevated stress," she said. "But not deception." That was the first crack in her certainty. "My name is Elias Wren. I was a systems engineer. Nothing special, no military background, no rebellion tattoos hidden under my sleeves. I'd signed onto this transport for one reason: to escape. Escape the Dominion's tightening grip on the frontier worlds. Escape a life where every innovation was taxed, controlled, and eventually weaponized. I hadn't planned on sharing that escape with one of their enforcers. Her name, I later learned, was Kilira. The hours that followed were tense and quiet. The ship's AI was partially offline, leaving life support running at minimal capacity. Communication arrays were dead. We were drifting in a corridor of dark matter interference. No rescue signal would get out for days, maybe weeks. Kilira kept her distance, never letting me out of her sight. When I moved to inspect the engine room, she followed, blade still active. Yet she didn't strike. Not once. "You could restrain me," I said at one point. "You don't have to watch me like this." "I could," she replied. "But then I would have to decide whether to execute you if resources become scarce." Her honesty was unsettling. As I worked, slowly rerouting power and sealing breaches, I began to notice things that didn't match the stories. She flinched at sudden noises. She paused before giving orders, as if weighing invisible consequences. Once, when she thought I wasn't looking, she touched the insignia on her armor with something that looked dangerously close to regret. During a forced rest cycle, we sat on opposite sides of the cargo bay, the dim emergency lights bathing everything in amber. "Why threaten me?" I asked quietly. "If your scans showed I wasn't lying." "Because hesitation gets you killed," she answered. Then, after a pause, "and because I was trained to believe humans only understand fear." I let that settle between us. "And now?" I asked. Her gaze met mine. "Now I am uncertain." The middle days blurred together. Repairs progressed slowly. Food supplies were limited, and despite her superior physiology, Kilira refused to take more than her calculated share. Each day, the distance between us shrank, not physically but emotionally. She began asking questions. "What is it like," she asked once, "to choose your own path?" I laughed softly. "Messy. Terrifying. Worth it." She absorbed that in silence. Eventually, the truth came out, Not through interrogation, but through exhaustion. I was sent to inspect this transport, she admitted. Unofficially. Unofficially, I echoed. The Dominion suspected dissidents among the crew. When the jump failed, command assumed sabotage. They ordered me to identify the responsible party and resolve it. And if you don't, I asked. Her jaw tightened. Then I will be marked defective, reconditioned, or terminated. For the first time since we met, the threat wasn't directed at me. That night, the ship shuddered violently. A cascade failure tore through the auxiliary reactor, sending us both sprawling. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, sealing us into a narrow maintenance corridor. The lights went out completely. In the darkness, I heard her breathing, fast, uneven. Kilira? I called. I am here, she said, but her voice shook. I cannot see. I reached for my wrist torch, activating a weak beam of light. She was crouched against the wall, blade extinguished, eyes dimmer than before. They never trained us for this, she admitted. Isolation. Powerlessness. The corridor trembled again. Instinct took over. I reached out. She froze. Don't, she warned. I'm not attacking, I said softly. I'm grounding you. Humans do it when panic sets in. For a heartbeat, she looked ready to strike. Then she did the unexpected. She reached for my hand. Her grip was firm, warmer than I expected. The tremor in her breathing slowly eased as the ship stabilized. In that moment, something shifted, something fragile and irreversible. We finished the repairs together, not as captor and prisoner, but as partners. When the engines finally came back online, we sat side by side in the cockpit, watching the stars stretch into motion. A rescue beacon from the Dominion flashed across the console. They will arrive in 6 hours, Kilira said. And what will you tell them? I asked. She was quiet for a long time. I will tell them the transport malfunctioned, she said finally. That the human engineer saved my life. And after that? She turned to me, eyes searching. After that, I don't know who I am supposed to be. The Dominion ship arrived on schedule. Orders were exchanged. Data logs were reviewed. And then, unexpectedly, Kilira removed her insignia and placed it on the console. I resign my commission, she said calmly. The silence that followed was deafening. They threatened her, promised consequences, offered reinstatement if she complied. She refused. In the chaos that followed, I did the only thing that felt right. I took her hand again. We escaped in a small auxiliary craft, jumping into uncharted space. No pursuit followed. Perhaps the Dominion feared the precedent more than our disappearance. Ending. Years later, on a world with twin suns and no Dominion flags, we stood on a cliff overlooking a growing settlement. Humans and Aurelians worked side by side below, engineers, farmers, explorers. Free. Kilira no longer wore armor. I no longer ran from my past. Do you regret it? I asked her, leaving everything behind. She laced her fingers through mine, a gesture that once would have been unthinkable. No, she said, because the moment I threatened you, I was still what they made me. The moment I reached for your hand, I became something else. Above us, ships lifted into the sky, not instruments of control, but of choice. And for the first time in either of our lives, the future wasn't programmed. It was ours. Not because the station was saved, but because it had accepted its fate. Around us, the vast orbital city drifted in silence, its war lights dimmed, its cannons cooling like exhausted beasts. The invaders were gone. Some had fled. Others had been erased by forces far older than any empire that dared to call itself eternal. I stood at the observation window, watching the stars slowly reclaim the sky. For the first time since humanity reached beyond its home system, space felt calm. Behind me, I heard her footsteps. She had once threatened me with execution, her voice sharp with authority and centuries of inherited hatred. I had been nothing to her, another fragile human standing in the shadow of a superior species. And yet, here she was now, no armor, no guards, no rank insignia glowing on her skin. Just her. "We won't forget what you did," she said quietly. "Not my people. Not yours." I turned to face her. I didn't do it alone. Her eyes, once cold, calculating, softened. That's why it mattered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Between us lay the weight of history, wars written in blood, civilizations built on fear of the other. The galaxy had always believed peace came from dominance. They were wrong. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out. When her fingers wrapped around my hand, I felt it, not power, not conquest, but connection. Two species that had been taught to fear each other, standing at the edge of annihilation, choosing something different. Around us, survivors emerged from shelters. Humans, aliens, enemies who had fought moments earlier now watched in stunned silence as we stood together, hand in hand. No speeches were made. None were needed. The message was clear. Empires fall. Weapons fail. But understanding, once chosen, can rewrite the future. As evacuation ships prepared to leave, she leaned closer and said, "The galaxy will resist this. They will call us naive." I smiled faintly. They always do, right before history changes. She squeezed my hand once more before letting go, returning to her people, to the hard work of rebuilding trust in a universe addicted to war. I watched her disappear into the crowd, knowing this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. And as my ship carried me back toward Earth, I realized something profound. The moment she reached for my hand wasn't the most unexpected thing she did. The unexpected thing was choosing hope in a universe that had forgotten how.